Does your financial advisor take the time to really listen to you? Is your financial strategy personalized to you and your family? Will your financial advisor be there as your life and financial situation change? Hi, I'm Jerry Mangona, your Edward Jones financial advisor, and I live here in Corktown, just a few blocks from the Daily Detroit studios. When we work together, we'll focus on what's important to you. We'll use an established process to create a personalized financial strategy backed by the advice, tools, and resources to help you reach your goals. And we'll partner to help your strategy stay on track. Contact me toll-free today at 866-975-8655. Again, that's 866-975-8655. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
One of the things that I thought I knew but learned differently when I started this was that I thought most people were on board with growing Metro Detroit and Michigan. I have since learned that is very much not the case, and many don't think any changes are needed here. Or it's an attitude that we don't have to make any improvements, and good riddance to those who want to leave or don't come here. On today's Daily Detroit for Thursday, June 15th, 2023, a conversation with Ned Staebler. He's the head of Techtown, one of Detroit's most successful startup and entrepreneurial incubators that's been in the game for 2 decades. I'm Jer Stays, and I wanted to talk to him as he makes a strong, articulate, and experienced case why we need to focus on growth as far as people and what people are paid here in Detroit, Metro Detroit, and Michigan. And investing in things like our communities and transit are needed to get there. It's a wide-ranging conversation. Even if you don't agree, I hope it makes you think. Feedback, as always, dailydetroit@gmail.com. And let's roll that tape. Joining me at the table at the Grand Hotel, Ned Staebler. He is the Vice President of Economic Development in Wayne State, and you might know him as the CEO of Techtown. Ned, it is so good to talk to you, but I also feel like these chairs need seatbelts because whenever I see you, I feel like I need to buckle up.
I think I only get invited to speak when people are like, it's been kind of boring around here. Let's get somebody who's going to throw some lightning bolts around and see if we can't stir it up a little bit. So let's do it, man. Buckle up.
All right, let's get into it. There are a number of topics we could get into. First off, let's talk about population and talent attraction. I feel like that's a natural tie-in to the work that Techtown has done. If people don't know, Techtown's been around Techtown's been around so long, I don't remember when it wasn't around.
Almost 20 years now. We're going to celebrate 20 years next year. So
wow,
get ready to write checks to our big fund drive or whatever it is.
So you've got to have a lot of thoughts and perspective on what's going on here and the changes happening.
Unfortunately, I'm older than Techtown. So I've been, working on this for a while. I just turned 50 last week, and I'm feeling every ounce of it up here at the conference. But yeah, I mean, that's the real challenge that some of us have been harping on for a long time now is we need more people, right? We need more people to help our economy grow. We need more people to help fill up the density in our cities and make them more vibrant. We just need more people. And I think folks are finally coming around to the data that some of us have been talking about for a long time. We said when I was in the Granholm administration 4,000 years ago, there were about 90,000 open jobs in the state of Michigan. Today, there's more like 350,000 open jobs. And you say, it's a sign of an expanding economy. No, here's the problem. Our workforce is down by 300,000 people. Because
wow. Now that's a number.
Yeah, we haven't changed our population over the last 20 years, but we've gotten older. People have retired, and we haven't replaced them with new workers. So our workforce is actually down a ton. And that's just, really slowing down the growth of our economy and small businesses and big businesses because they can't find the workers they need here to grow. So they're going elsewhere to get talent now.
Yeah. When you put it in those kind of terms, it makes it in some ways even more clear because I think a lot of people look at this conversation and they'll go, I get this feedback with this population talk. Well, why do we need to change? Why do we need to grow? What's the problem? But when you put it in that term, it makes it starkly clear.
Yeah. I mean, we don't need to grow. If you wanted to stay the same as we age, get older, and then die, that's fine. I mean, we can do that. But that's not how the world works, right? I mean, I guess it does over 100 million years. The world is going to, there were dinosaurs and they're not here anymore. But we don't want to be dinosaurs, I don't think. I think we have a shared vision of a Michigan that's prosperous, that our kids want to be in. We don't want to get on an airplane to go visit our grandkids and, on the coast or in the South or something. And so if we want Michigan to be like that, we got to change because, Detroit is the only major metropolitan area in this country that doesn't have bus rapid transit of some sort, a real mass transit system. right? And when you go and talk to people about why they're choosing to live in places like Denver, Boston, Austin, and I hate to say this, Columbus or Fort Wayne.
Listen, I wrote an article about Columbus and I've been researching on it. And let me tell you, there's no hate on the internet like saying that Columbus is all right to visit or Columbus is doing well.
I live in Ann Arbor, so I would never actually say that, but you ain't wrong, man. You know, people vote with their feet, and their feet are moving to a lot of other places and not Michigan. We're like 49th out of 50 in attracting new people to Michigan.
I've thought I'm crazy the last 10 or so years.
No comment.
Very possible that I also am, right? Two things can be true at the same time. But I feel like this is something that those of us who have been following this conversation, who have been in the trenches where I have, listeners all over the region. I hear from people. I know people. I have friends that I've said goodbye to. This has been brewing for a while. And I feel like I've been a little like crazy talk, like, hey, this is happening. And then all of a sudden at this conference, it's like, oh, it's happening. But I feel like it's been happening for a while.
Yeah, you go back to 1990 and you look at it, our per capita income, which is the measure I use, some sort of either per capita or household incomes are generally, if you're an economic developer, that's what you're supposed to be developing, right? Because that's really what we're talking about. It's not jobs, it's not investment. Ultimately, we want the people of Michigan, the residents here, to have more money, right? That's what people want. So if you look at that, go back 30 years, we were basically the same as Minnesota, Washington, Colorado, right? We were about 15 to 20% above the national average. Go back in the 1980s, we were 20% above. Today, we're almost 10% below the national average in per capita incomes, and we are 20 or 30% below Washington, Oregon, Minnesota, Colorado, those kinds of states. They're crushing us. We got to stop comparing ourselves to Indiana, Ohio, Tennessee, or Kentucky, because they're not doing much better. We need to go and look at the states that have figured this
There's
out.
some data that came out as we're kind of talking about this, and I got briefed on it, that 51% of Detroit residents say that transit is one of the problems, or access to transportation is one of the problems of them getting employment. And when you're talking about this, it's like it's so multifaceted. It's, of course, we got to pay people more. Like all these placemaking things, I don't want to besmirch them, but like when I think about hiring people, usually they look at the pay packet first, and then the other stuff follows. That's like the leading thing. And then also the idea of locking people into geographic poverty kind of terrifies me, because it's like, it's one thing to say, oh, there's all these opportunities, but if we don't give people boots or straps, they cannot pull themselves up by the bootstraps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we often talk about markets and markets failing, right? And so in Detroit, you've had markets like, say, the housing market, which has failed. You can't get a mortgage, blah, blah, we know about it. You know what other market has failed in Detroit? The labor market, okay? So 2/3 of the people in the city of Detroit that work in the suburbs. And about 3/4 of the people that work in the city of Detroit live in the suburbs. So you basically have this weird crisscrossing every day. And yet we don't have a functional transit system to make that work. Now, the high wage jobs, you think about it, the ones that are downtown in Gilbertville or, Illichland or whatever.
Illich Village is what I prefer.
Illich Village, I like that. Those folks are driving fancy cars coming down from Oakland County or Macomb County or wherever, not as much of a problem for them. But, folks in Detroit that are going out to generally lower wage jobs in the suburbs, real problem for them, because if it's going to take you 2-3 hours to get there, or you got to drive with the high cost of car insurance and gas and all that, and car repairs, given these roads, and you're talking about $10 an hour, $12 an hour, that's a big chunk of your salary that's going to getting to and from work. So we got to fix that transit problem. I mean, if for no other reason that people don't come here because they look at it and go, that's silly. Every place else I go has cool trains and buses and stuff. And there's a lot more practical aspects to it too. But that really is just a basic, function. When you ask not only Detroiters about having transit problems, when you ask folks why they chose to live places, transit comes up as one of the top reasons over and over and over again.
It's interesting to see the dichotomy to me between like suburban views on it, because of course they don't really see it as a problem because they don't experience it as much percentage wise.
I mean, they don't spend from a budget perspective, but when there's people who don't show up to make them coffee, they see, right? When they go try to go to their Starbucks in Birmingham and they can't find workers and stuff because the workers can't get there. They see it. But you're right. I mean, transit is a kind of thing with, diffuse benefits. So it's a little harder to see the value of it. But that's kind of the role of leadership, right? That's the role of politics, is for us to say, and planning and those kind of things, say, look, we can analyze what works and what doesn't. We can isolate the factors that are important for economic growth. And transit is undoubtedly 100%. You won't find a quote unquote expert anywhere who won't tell you that transit is essential for all sorts of aspects of economic growth.
So you look at all these things that have been unveiled. There's like a task force now that they've talked about and all this other stuff. What is your general feeling on all of this?
Cautiously optimistic.
Okay.
You know, my family's lived in Michigan for almost 200 years now. I'm about 50. I will tell you, this isn't the first time we've had these conversations. So I'm not going to go all in and go, hallelujah, everything is fixed. But I'm cautiously optimistic. This time we're going to execute on some of them. I think that's super important, that it's not enough just to talk about it. We need to go and put our money where our mouth is. You know, people always say they care about this or that. And I think the response is, don't tell me what your values are. Show me your budget, and I'll tell you what your values are. So, you know, we spend $700 million on an auto factory in Marshall, including $300 million of infrastructure to build a, you know, circular on-off ramp from the highway for it. Okay. How about we spend $300 million in Corktown putting in transit infrastructure around the Ford Michigan Central project, right? You want to talk about something that have benefits for an entire city, an entire neighborhood, would attract tens of thousands of new people that are unrelated to that Michigan Central project to it? That would be massive return on investment. Whereas maybe I'll use that off-ramp once going out to Marshall. I don't know.
It's getting that money closer to people.
It's investing in people. It's a bottom-up approach. How do we invest in people and places? Because the new paradigm in economic development, and it's not that new, it's been 20 or 30 years, we just haven't adjusted to it, is people don't follow investment. Investment follows people.
Why do we keep doing the same thing? Like, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So why do we keep doing the same thing? Is it time to say that, like, we really need to shift all of how we do all this stuff from top to bottom?
The motto of this conference is yes and, or the power of and, or something about and. So I'm a big believer in and. There is no, I wish I could tell you, this is part of why we keep doing the same thing, is because there's no magic bullet. It's not like someone wrote a playbook and it's like, do this one thing and all your problems will be solved.
One neat trick.
Yeah, if we had one neat trick, trust me, we're very smart people here in Michigan. We would have figured that out. We would have done it. But it's not. The problem is it is a comprehensive strategy of 10 to 15 things that we need to do consistently for a long time to make it work. We've been underinvesting in our cities, in our transit, in our people, our schools, our higher education for 30 years, right? You don't fix that in one budget or one term in office. And it's hard to get people to think 4, 5, 10, 2 terms, 3 terms out there to make those kinds of impacts. But if we don't do it, we'll be having this conversation again in 15 years as the spiral continues downward.
With fewer people.
That's true. There'll be fewer of us to have the conversation, which will make it easier, but it won't make actually won't make it easier, because, you know, we had a once in a lifetime opportunity with all this federal money, and it's still a bunch of it sitting around out there. And we need to make sure that, you know, back to the yes and, okay, we're the global epicenter of mobility. We need to remain the global epicenter of mobility. So we're investing in battery plants. Now, I would argue the pre-production work is the real high value add, but I get it. We're gonna have the production work too. That's great. And we need to do this other stuff, like transit, walkable urbanism, small businesses, you know, higher education, all of those things that create the places that talent people want to be.
What are some of the ways that Techtown, for those who maybe are not as familiar, what are some of the ways that Techtown is making an impact with that stuff? Because, look, I see Project by Techtown or some variants of that under a ton of things nowadays, and it's pretty cool.
So at Techtown, we are all about figuring out what the market needs to do. We take sort of a 4-step approach when we analyze a new opportunity. We say, can we do it? Is it actually doable? Is there a market for it? Does the market really need it? Is it financially viable, right? Can someone fund it, or can we pay for it to do it? And then finally, are we the right people to do it? My number one pet peeve is when people...
That's a crucial thing.
Yeah, it's like you get 26 people trying to do the exact same thing. And I'm like, if you all got together, you probably could do it, but individually you won't. So we put everything through one of those 4 filters. And then we spend our time trying to remove barriers for people in Michigan, mostly in Detroit, Hamtramck, Highland Park, but also in the Metro Detroit area a little more broadly, to actually have access to accomplish the goals that they want. We are not about going and attracting companies from around the world. That will happen, right? If you create a more vibrant tech economy in Southeast
They'll
Michigan,
show up.
they will show up. But we want to make sure that the people in Detroit get to participate in it. So last year we worked with 858 entrepreneurs. 68% of them were Black. 67% of them use she, her, hers pronouns. 12% of them were immigrants. These are actual Detroiters. They raised $34 million to grow their businesses. They created hundreds of jobs. And most importantly, they created amenities and opportunities in the neighborhoods for people who live in the city of Detroit. Some of those businesses are going to grow and be the next Little Caesars or United Wholesale Mortgage or Home Depot. Some of them are going to go out of business. I mean, that's just the way it works. We're going to try to minimize that.
See, I love the honesty about what you're talking about here, because so many things are like, oh, it's going to be this great thing and whatever. And you're like, yeah, some of them are going to do great. Some of them are going to be in the middle and some of them aren't going to work, but that's business. And I appreciate the clarity and the honesty of that.
Man, I am too old and I've been doing this too long to start, dancing around the stuff. My goal is to underpromise and overdeliver 100% of the time. So, for example, we started a program during COVID called 313 Strong, really financially based. We use Northern Initiatives software platform that's a CDFI out of the northern part of the state. They're great. And we enrolled about 40 companies in it during the early months of COVID. Every single one of them survived COVID, right? We didn't think they all would, but they did. Now, there's some self-selection there. The folks that were willing to come and do the work are the ones best positioned. But generally speaking, you're right. Not everyone's going to make it. The survival rates for small businesses in Michigan and Detroit are much higher than national. We like to think that's a testament to the work that we do. But we also think it's time that the state double down and invest in it. Because, historically it's been philanthropy that's been doing this work. And the state has been, focused much more on the large business, the large attraction projects and all that. I think we're starting to see now the power of and the state is, starting to do small business support hubs and things that are going to be building from the bottom up, which is so important.
For the record, you have the best description of the power of and I've heard this entire weekend or this entire week.
When I get home, I'm going to write my brief. Our PR folks are like, what are you going to do to capitalize on this conference? I said, well, the whole thing's about the power and. I think one of the problems they've had is everybody's got a different and. So I think my column is going to be, what's your and? And mine is going to be transit, place, walkable urbanism, entrepreneurship. That's my and, because we haven't really been doing that, a lot over the last 30, 40 years. But part of the challenge is, some people it's affordable housing, some people it's healthcare. That's the
and
thing.
Both are valuable.
They're all valuable. There's no magic bullet. But when we think of economic development, what do we think of? We think of big incentives. We think of worker training programs. That's it. But the reality is economic development now is so much more holistic. It's transit. It is affordable housing. It is commercial corridors. It's infrastructure like roads and broadband. It's higher education. All of those things are economic development. And we haven't structured, our state government is still structured around, 1980 when, there was MDOT and then there was, the higher ed committee and there was this and that. We need to think about this way more holistically. There needs to be someone at MDOT who wakes up every morning thinking about economic development. Somebody at Mischa, and they've got some folks, but are really coordinated with MEDC and MDOT and, the healthcare folks that are all thinking about how is this an economic development perspective.
And putting people in those jobs that have those experiences, right? I think one of the reasons why we don't have as much conversation about transit is because, look, I've ridden the bus to work. I've never seen any of these people before, right?
Wow, yeah.
You know what I mean? If you know it and you've been it, right? You use the Woodward every day, or I use the Jefferson every day for a while, then you understand just intrinsically, you have more understanding than if you're in a car from, suburb A to suburb B or to Lansing or whatever. Yeah. It's that on the ground experience. When you live it, you can share more about it and lead better, I think.
No, you're 100% right. And this, I don't mean to knock any of these people or any of these leaders.
I'm not doing that's
They're
what I'm saying.
Great,
it's life experience.
hardworking, smart, motivated people. They're great. But you're right. When you're changing systems, you got to get everybody in to experience them. So, for example, in the state of Michigan, the food benefits program, there was a group called Sevilla that's actually based out of Techtown up on the second floor that they got asked by the Department of Health and Human Services to look at the process you go through to get food benefits in the state of Michigan. It was the longest form, 64 pages, and the biggest pain in the butt to do it. And of course, these are the people that have had a life-altering situation, that they're in the worst situation possible to go through a multi-month process to get all this done. And they had this form and they brought in the top people at HHS 4 or 5 years ago. had them sit out in our hallway and set up like a waiting room and gave them the form. 3 of the 4 of them had never seen the form before. And when they saw it, they were shocked, right? And now it's a 6-page form because you put these people who are smart, hardworking civil servants out there to do good, and you get them into a situation where they experience the roads or the transit or the whatever, and they're like, oh, I get it now. We need to fix it this way. Sitting in an ivory tower and designing solutions doesn't work in academia. It doesn't work in government. It doesn't work in the private sector either. Everybody needs to be with their customers and their consumers when they're designing solutions.
And I think about that too for future conferences and things like that, that we talk about Gen Z and all that stuff, making sure that they're here and part of it and interviewed and in this conversation too, right? What are the things they're actually valuing and all that kind of stuff?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and it's not hard. They're happy to tell you.
It's just working with intention.
It's exactly working with intention. No, not thinking you know best, actually going and spending time with them and then listening to them and not saying, well, they said this, but I don't believe them. No. When they tell you and you see it happening, so they tell you they want transit, they want walkable urbanism. They want, this is crazy. Brookings did a great study on micropolitan areas and, what factors were correlated with desirability and things. And it wasn't warm weather, proximity to coasts or lakes or mountains. It was home goods stores, restaurants, theaters. Negatively correlated was golf courses and bowling alleys. But the transit, they wanted good schools. I mean, they wanted things that, they say they want, and sure enough, with their feet, they're voting and moving to those places. We should listen to them.
I think I'll leave it there. Ned, it's always so good to talk to you. I really appreciate
Great
you.
to see you too. I'll see you back in the D.
All right, thanks so much for listening. Remember, happy hour on Wednesday, June 21st at Castalia Cocktails in Midtown, 5 to 8 p.m. Thanks to engineer Randy Walker for editing this episode and Cheyenne Noserini for producing Well Up on the Island. Tomorrow, Mr. Friday, Devin O'Reilly joins me to talk about the fun and tasty places we've been around town and the stories of the day. With that, I'm Jer Stays. Don't forget to tell a friend about the show. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever fine shows are found. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll talk tomorrow.